Wilt thou take this woman to be thy wedded wife, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy state of matrimony? Wilt thou love her, comfort her, honor her, and keep her, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others, so long as ye both shall live?
I will.
How sad, how horribly sad.
Please, Papa, it is Miss Taylor's day.
And a terribly sad one it is, too. We will lose her forever.
Dear Papa, do try to appreciate the joy of the occasion.
Joy at a wedding. I am sorry, Emma, but there can be nothing but tears on this day.
Forsaking all others, so long as ye both shall live?
I will.
Two friends gone.
But think of Miss Taylor's happiness.
Well, she was perfectly happy taking care of you.
And I no longer require such care. Besides, I made the match myself.
I do wish you hadn't.
I now pronounce you man and wife.
No one in Highbury thought Mr. Weston would marry again except I. And who could have dreamt Miss Taylor would do so well? I did. Is there anything more delicious than the glory of having schemed successfully? Of course, Papa sometimes disagrees with me.
Poor Miss Taylor. Poor Miss Taylor.
Papa, do think of her benefit.
I wish she had never met Mr. Weston at all.
But he is such a pleasant man, and she will have a house of her own.
Well, where's the advantage in that? This house is 3 times as large. She'll never get used to Randall's.
Oh, I think she will, dear Papa.
How will we ever visit her?
By carriage.
Pshaw! James will never let the horses out for such a little way.
The horses are to be stabled with Mr. Weston. We talked it through last night.
Poor Miss Taylor. We may never see her again.
They are half a mile away, Papa.
Half a mile away, Papa.
Mr. Knightley has arrived.
Oh, Mr. Knightley has arrived.
A letter from London for Emma, and my heartiest congratulations to you both. How did everyone behave? Who cried the most?
Poor Miss Taylor.
Poor Mr. and Miss Woodhouse, I should say, but I cannot agree with poor Miss Taylor. At any rate, it must be better having one to please rather than two.
Especially when one is such a fanciful, troublesome creature.
Yes, it is true, my dear. I am sometimes very fanciful and troublesome.
Dearest Papa, you cannot think I or Mr. Knightley meant you. You must find fault with me.
I am not inclined to flatter Emma, sir. I merely meant to say that Mrs. Taylor has been used to pleasing two, and now will only be Mr. Weston.
Dear Emma bears everything so well, but she will miss her more than she thinks.
There is the joy, Papa, of having made the match.
Made the match. I do wish you hadn't. Everything you say comes to pass.
I promise never to make one for myself, Papa, but for other people it's the most wonderful game in the world. And you must admit I've made a great success of it.
A success? That would imply you caused it to happen. Merely saying, I think it would be a good thing for Miss Taylor if Mr. Weston were to marry her is nothing but fancy.
I thought you cleverer, Mr. Knightley. I have a talent that cannot be denied. If I hadn't promoted Mr. Weston's visits here, he may never have married again.
You're lucky that your interfering did not harm them or yourself.
Well, Emma never thinks of herself at all. And she likes to do good for others. But, my dear, I wish you would not make matches. They are silly things. and, well, they break up one's family.
Just one more, Papa. Poor Mr. Elton. You like him, Papa, I know you do.
Mr. Elton.
And I thought as he was joining the Westons' hands today that he looked as if he would like to have the very same service done for him.
Oh, then invite him to dinner, Emma. Treat him to the finest fish and chicken, but leave him to choose his own wife.
I like Mr. Elton, and he deserves my talents.
A man of 26, he can take care of himself.
Mr. Knightley can be a terrible spoil-sport. Don't you agree?
Now that poor Miss Taylor is gone, who will accompany you on walks and beg you to read and practice the piano? You will have no one.
Ah, but Papa was wrong. I found the perfect friend. A pretty, young woman who requires my services.
Oh, Miss Woodhouse. What a coincidence in meeting you.
Will you introduce us, Harriet?
Oh, yes, of course. Mr. Martin, Miss Woodhouse.
How do you do, madame?
My pleasure, Mr. Martin.
And, now, if you'll, excuse me, good day.
Is he like what you expected?
He is remarkably plain, isn't he? But his looks are nothing compared with his lack of manners.
I suppose he's not as well-mannered as a true gentleman.
You are a beautiful young woman, Harriet.
Am I?
And you come from the best stock.
I do? How can you be sure?
Your father may well have held a title.
Oh, you think so?
I'm not sure on your opinion on the relationship between Harriet Smith and Emma, but I fear it may be a bad thing.
Oh, I've been observing them with the greatest pleasure. Emma will instruct Harriet, and she will be Emma's companion. And since Emma wants her new friend to be better informed, it will be an incentive for her to read more.
Emma has been meaning to read more since she was 12 years old. She's drawn up more lists than books that have been published. And Harriet Smith is the worst sort of companion for Emma. She knows nothing herself and looks to Emma as an expert on everything.
Emma is a kind soul and an excellent daughter. And how well she looked the other night?
Yes, she is pretty.
Pretty? She's as beautiful as any young woman could be.
But what will become of her? It would do her some good to be in love with a proper man and some doubt about his affection.
For as beautiful as she is, Emma is certainly not vain.
No, but her vanity works in a different way, scheming. Can you not find a better companion for her than Harriet Smith?
It's been many years since I've given her advice. And besides, I believe in Emma's good sense.
I want you to seek the best in everything, dear Harriet. The Martins may be good people, but they lack standing in the community.
They were ever so nice to me this summer. Mr. Martin walked 3 whole miles one day to bring me walnuts.
Does Mr. Martin read?
Oh, yes, agricultural reports. And other things.
Harriet, you have already seen other examples of good manners and breeding at Hartfield, have you not? Mr. Elton and Mr. Weston,
Mr. Weston's so old.
which makes his manners all the more valuable. And in one respect, Mr. Elton is superior even to Mr. Knightley. He is gentle and good-humored. Didn't I tell you what he said just the other day? Harriet Smith is a beautiful young lady, is she not?
Very much so.
He said that? Mr. Elton is very agreeable.
Of course he is. And his situation is most suitable.
But the grace and elegance that you have added, Miss Woodhouse, are even greater than her original gifts.
I'm glad you think I've been useful, but she's only wanted drawing out, and a few hints. Harriet's sweet temper and natural grace were her own. Perhaps she now has a more decisive character.
Very much so.
He especially admires your decisive character.
He does?
Have you ever sat for a portrait, Harriet?
Me? Oh, no, I couldn't.
It would be an exquisite possession for the right gentleman.
A marvelous idea, Miss Woodhouse, to exercise your ample talents in the favor of your friend.
He's asked me to paint you.
He has?
I've done some drawings, partial ones, but never a portrait.
Oh, Miss Woodhouse, I couldn't possibly sit for a portrait by you.
Well, Mr. Elton insists on it.
He does?
It's his heart's desire.
I have no doubt that you will do your friend justice. Your steadiness with the brush, Miss Woodhouse, is remarkable.
It isn't difficult to paint someone as beautiful as Harriet.
I cannot wait another moment.
Do be patient, Mr. Elton.
Will you be keeping the portrait for Hartfield?
I was hoping someone might want it as a gift.
It would be the utmost pleasure for me to accept it.
All right, Mr. Elton. You may gaze upon it.
It is magnificent. A triumph. You have given her the final touches of perfect beauty.
The expression of the eyes is perfect, but the eyebrows are not quite right.
I cannot agree with you. It is a perfect resemblance in every feature.
You made her too tall, Emma.
Not too tall in the least. Consider, she is sitting down.
Very prettily done, my dear, just as always. The only thing that troubles me is that you set it out of doors. It makes me worried she might catch cold with only a shawl covering her shoulders.
But Mr. Woodhouse, setting it out of doors is a true artistic touch, and the simplicity of Miss Smith's expression. I've never seen such a likeness.
Yes, nor have I.
It is a masterpiece. I shall take it to London for framing myself.
Well, what shall I do?
In what respect?
To Mr. Martin's letter.
You must answer it, of course.
Is it a good letter?
A very good letter. So good I think one of his sisters must have helped him.
Oh. But what shall I say? Dear Miss Woodhouse, do advise me.
No, the response should be all your own. And it should be unequivocal without regretting his disappointment.
So, you think I ought to refuse him?
My dear Harriet, had you any doubt about that? I beg your pardon if I misjudged. I imagined you were consulting me only about the wording of your reply. Did you mean to return a favorable answer?
No. I mean, that is, I'm not sure. Oh, Miss Woodhouse, what shall I do? Please, please advise me.
I shall not. You must settle the matter with your own feelings.
I had no idea he liked me so much.
As a general rule, Harriet, if a woman doubts whether she should accept a man, she ought to refuse him. As an older friend, it is my duty to say so. But don't imagine I would want to influence you.
Oh, no, I'm sure you are too kind to. But if you would just advise me. No, I don't mean advise. As you say, my mind ought to be made up. I shouldn't be hesitating. It would be safer to say no. Would it be safer to say no?
Not for the world would I advise you either way. If you prefer Mr. Martin to any man in the world, to anyone you can think of, why should you hesitate?
As you will not give me your opinion, Miss Smith, I must do what I can myself. my mind to refuse Mr. Martin. Is that right?
Perfectly right. While you were wavering ever so slightly, I couldn't try to influence you. But I could never have visited Mrs. Robert Martin of Abbeyville Farm.
Oh, how dreadful. What a narrow escape. I wouldn't give you up for anyone else in the world.
Now, my dear little modest Harriet, do you know where that painting of you is at this very moment?
No?
In the hands of Mr. Elton. Perhaps he is showing it to his mother and sisters and telling them how much more beautiful is the original.
Oh, you see everything, Miss Woodhouse.
I can see a blissful future together. Have you noticed how often Mr. Elton expresses enthusiasm for Miss Smith?
I cannot share it. She's pretty, but I cannot rate her beauty in the way you do. And her character depends entirely on her company. In capable hands, she might become a valuable woman.
And those capable hands have already been at work.
I'll admit, you cured her of that schoolgirl giggle.
I'd be disappointed if I hadn't been of some use, though I'm pleased you should take notice.
There is reason to believe your friend will hear something to her advantage.
Is that so? Do let me guess the source. It must be Mr. Elton.
No, Robert Martin approached me about proposing marriage to Harriet Smith.
Anything else, madam? No, thank you.
He is an excellent young man. Well-mannered, good senses. I praised your young friend, but I told him she would be lucky in such a match.
And I have news for you, Mr. Knightley. He wrote to her yesterday and was refused.
Then she is more foolish than I imagined.
I suppose it's impossible for a man to understand how a woman could reject an offer of marriage. A man imagines a woman is ready for anybody who asks.
A man imagines no such thing. I do hope you are wrong about your friend's feelings.
I saw her write the answer.
You saw her answer. I will suppose you wrote it yourself or persuaded her to reject him.
And if I did, which I'm not admitting, I'd have done her a great favor. Robert Martin is a respectable young man, I suppose, but he is hardly Harriet's equal. I'm surprised he dared propose to her.
Not Harriet's equal. No, he is far superior in every way, and most certainly in common sense. Whoever her parents were, they left her little provisions, and she was as happy as could be at the Martins this summer. I know she would not have rejected him if you had not turned her into a friend.
You are unjust. Harriet has a sweet temperament, and 99 out of 100 would call her beautiful. And until men fall in love with well-informed minds instead of handsome faces, a girl as lovely as Harriet is certain to be admired and sought after.
Oh, to hear you abuse the reason you have, Emma, I would almost prefer you had none.
And isn't that the feeling of all men? A girl like Harriet bewitches a man's senses and satisfies his judgment. Were you yourself ever to marry, she is the very woman for you.
I always thought your friendship was foolish, but you've puffed her up so that no man will ever be good enough for her. If she doesn't marry Robert Martin, she may end up boarded at Miss Goddard's house for the rest of her life.
We think differently on this subject, Mr. Knightley, so there's little use in debate. She has refused him decidedly. No one but a gentleman in good education and manner will do for Harriet Smith.
Nonsense, pure nonsense. He has more gentility than she will ever understand. But since you've such a high regard for your matchmaking abilities, know this. If Elton is your man for Harriet Smith, then you will labor in vain.
Oh, Mr. Knightley, do not assume to know all of my stratagems.
Depend upon it. Elton will not do. He is a vicar and knows the value of a good income.
It would be kind of you to offer advice if I had set my eye on Mr. Elton. But at present I wish to keep Harriet for myself.
Though I pity Robert Martin's embarrassment, he is better off without Harriet Smith. Good morning to you.
Oh, he vexes me. How could he not see in Harriet what I see? And where could she be? Could she have met Robert Martin this morning at Miss Goddard's school? It would be dreadful if he had pleaded his case again. No, it isn't likely. He would be too ashamed by the response to the letter to seek her out. It is certain. Only someone with my acute powers of observation could have detected Mr. Elton's passionate glances and amorous commendations.
So let us know when the carolers have arrived, will you, Elsie?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Elsie.
Though it is already December, we are fortunate that there has been little weather to prevent the ladies from traveling out of doors.
Indeed, it is difficult to believe the Christmas season is upon us.
Yes, yes, but soon there will be snow and slush and cold. And your visits will be all too infrequent, my dear.
What else? A carriage will always be at the ready for you or Emma, sir.
Mrs. Weston, are you certain you're happy?
I've never been happier.
But Hartfield has not been the same without you. You will be joining us for Christmas dinner.
Emma has already invited us. I will be seated between the two of you just as always.
Now, Papa, I know it's been difficult, but we have seen Mrs. Weston every day since her wedding.
Yes, my dear, but she's always obliged to go away again.
It's been hard, Papa, but I can tell you're happy. You're positively glowing.
And what about you, Emma? Are you still determined never to marry?
I would have to meet someone far superior to any man I've known.
Oh, and isn't that possible?
You, above all people, know I cannot change for the better.
Well, now, Emma.
It would be different if I weren't to fall in love, but it hasn't happened, and it isn't my way.
Have you been reading and practicing the piano?
Oh, yes, from time to time. But I've been busy with matters of the heart.
I should have known.
A little too busy, I should say.
Now, Mrs. Weston, didn't you notice Mr. Elton's keenness for Harriet's painting?
Oh, yes, and for the artist far more than the subject.
Ah, but he is mistaken.
I think it is she who is in the wrong.
Our disagreements always seem to arise from my being in the wrong. Will you ever allow me to be right?
I was 16 when you were born.
No doubt you were far superior in judgment at that point. But haven't the intervening 21 years brought us closer in understanding?
I still have the advantage of 16 years, and of not being a pretty, spoiled young girl.
You underestimate me, Mr. Knightley.
Come, Emma, let us be friends and not quarrel.
Just one more word.
Ah,
In regard to Robert Martin and Harriet Smith, let us say we are both in the right. Come, shake hands with me.
We will hear the sermon on Sunday, Mr. Elton. Now, where will you and Mrs. Weston take your holiday?
In the south, I expect.
But the breezes in the south produce such a chill. Do be careful for Mrs. Weston's sake.
I will.
Colds have never been so prevalent as they have been this autumn.
I have noticed that.
Yes, our apothecary, Mr. Perry, has pronounced November a very sickly month indeed.
Mr. Weston, have you heard from your son yet?
Oh, just yesterday. A letter of congratulations from Mr. Frank Churchill, Esquire.
He sends his regrets for his absence and promises to visit soon.
Well, that is our hope.
Yes, he's been wanting to come since September, but Mrs. Churchill, his aunt who raised him, is not well and requires his company.
What a great pleasure his visit will be for you and Mrs. Weston.
Oh, you shall hear from us as soon as Frank arrives.
Thank you. The carolers have arrived, sir?
Oh, the carolers have arrived. Lovely children, the carolers. I can manage, my dear.
I'm sorry for Mrs. Weston. Frank Churchill ought to have attended his father's wedding.
He is not always the master of his time.
He has been threatening to grace Highbury for years.
I'm told he's dependent on his aunt.
A man of 23 or 24 without the freedom of will to do what he ought.
You were the worst judge in the world, Mr. Knightley, of the difficulties of dependence.
If he were to say to his aunt, I must visit my father and his new wife immediately, there would be no objection to his going.
No, but there might be to his coming back again.
Then he is a very weak man indeed, having never before carried out a resolution.
You were determined to think badly of him.
I am not. I am willing to admit any merits he may have, if he has any, other than his being very handsome and agreeable.
Well, if he has nothing else to recommend him, he will be a treasure in Highbury.
Forgive me for being less than overwhelmed when he does eventually arrive.
We shall never agree about him.
I doubt we shall.
You are prejudiced against him.
I most certainly am not.
Well, I am prejudiced in his favor.
So be it.
Ah, Miss Woodhouse, I was
Excuse me.
I was hoping to find you here.
Mr. Elton, I'm terribly sorry that Harriet was unable to join us. I'm afraid she's laid up with a fever and a sore throat.
I hope it isn't contagious.
I think we are safe. Though you will have to settle with me, I'm afraid, as your companion this evening.
Nothing would make me happier.
Thank you.
Oh, Miss Woodhouse, do not force me to contain myself any longer.
Pardon?
You are my light, my song, my morning, my evening. You are the love of my life, Miss Woodhouse.
Mr. Elton, what are you...
No! Do not speak. Let me look at you and praise you and caress your alabaster arms.
Mr. Elton!
Surely you've seen my boundless affection for you.
What?
How I hung on your every word.
I did not.
I adore you, Miss Woodhouse. I've adored you ever since I came to Highbury, hoping that you would return my love, but fearing I might not be good enough for you.
I beg your pardon?
But now I know my love cannot be equaled by another.
What are you talking about, Mr. Elton?
I am ready to die if you refuse me, but I know you will not.
Restrain yourself, sir.
I cannot. I am inflamed with passion.
It cannot be for me. Surely it is meant for Miss Smith.
Miss Smith? Miss Smith? I don't understand.
I'm astonished, especially after observing the attention you paid to her.
Oh, good heavens, Miss Smith. I've never given her a thought. If she weren't your friend, I couldn't care whether she were alive or dead. If she thought otherwise, then her own feelings led her astray, and I'm very sorry about that. But who can think of Miss Smith when Miss Woodhouse is near? Every part of my being has been in the service of adoring you, and only you. Charming Miss Woodhouse, allow me to believe this interesting silence is a sign that you have long understood me.
It is most certainly not. I have been utterly in the dark about your feelings, at least until this moment, and I thought that your pursuit of Miss Smith, or what I thought was your pursuit, was your reason for making frequent visits to Hartfield. Am I to assume you never thought seriously of Miss Smith?
Never, madam. Oh, Miss Smith is a good sort of girl, and I wish her well. I'm sure there are men who might not mind. Everyone has their level. But as for me, my fortune is not so small that I need to seek an alliance with Miss Smith. I came to Hartfield only to be in your presence and the encouragement I received.
Encouragement? I gave you encouragement? You are entirely mistaken. I only wished for your success with Miss Smith. I have no interest in matrimony at the present time. Good evening, sir.
I'm most sorry. Good evening.
What a wretched business! How could I have been so wrong about him? I in love with Elton? That he should suppose himself my equal in connection and mind. Though, having mistaken his feelings, I've little right to wonder why he should have mistaken mine. Oh, how could I have been so wrong? I must have taken up the idea and made everything bend to it. And poor Harriet! She would never have thought of him if I hadn't assured her of his attachment. Now, poor girl, her peace will be cut up for some time. I should have been satisfied in persuading her to reject young Martin. There, I was quite right. That was well done. Yet, even with Mr. Elton, I was only introducing her to good company. And what is so wrong with that? than I.
Thank you, Miss Woodhouse. I'm sure it was entirely my fault.
I was grossly mistaken, my dear friend.
He's such an amiable man. It's easy to see how I could be so naive.
But how could I have been so wrong? All my observations and prophecies for the last 6 weeks, wrong.
Mr. Elton is such a good man.
Dear Harriet, don't cry.
He is perfection itself.
I still can't believe you had no feelings for you.
He's far too good for someone like myself.
Not at all. You are a beautiful young woman of impeccable character, who may very well have been of high birth.
You are such a good friend, Miss Woodhouse. I would never have hoped for a man of such distinction had you not thought it possible.
It should have been possible. Probable, even.
Mr. Elton is so good to the poor.
No, Harriet. We shall endeavor to drive Mr. Elton from your mind immediately.
I don't know how. Every time I see him, I will feel ashamed.
He is visiting friends in Bath for a month, and by the time he returns, all will be lost.
But he will still be the most perfect man on earth.
Let us think of others for a while. Will you come with me to call Miss Bates? I've been negligent in calling on her, and it will take our minds off Mr. Elton.
I shall be like Miss Banks, a poor spinster.
Harriet, you are still very young, and you shall marry into wealth.
And what about yourself?
Oh, I will never marry.
Never?
Few married women are half as much mistress of their husbands' houses as I am of Hartfield, and I will never be truly beloved in another man's eyes as I am in my father's.
But to be an old maid, like Miss Bates.
I shall have music and sewing and books, and nieces and nephews.
Are you acquainted with Miss Bates's niece?
I have known her since we were children, but I cannot say we are well acquainted, though I should be. Miss Bates forces visitors to listen to every one of her letters 40 times over. Her compliments to us all, her diet, her illnesses, her lack of parents, her insufficient income, until I am sick of the very name Jane Fairfax.
Miss Bates does enjoy talking.
She received a letter from Jane just last week, so we may be safe on that account.
Oh, how kind of you to visit, Miss Woodhouse, and to bring your friend, too. How is your father's health?
Very well, thank you for asking.
Oh, I worry about his health, though I know that you will take the best care of him. Oh, please, come sit where it is warm near the fire. The rest of the house is cold.
And how's your mother?
Oh, confined to her bed, I'm afraid. Thank you for asking. Would you both do me the honor of taking a piece of the sweet cake that I baked? Mr. and Mrs. Cole visited only a few minutes ago. They partook of the sweet cake and pronounced it quite enjoyable.
It's very kind of you to offer.
Normally, I have just a slice of bread and very little butter for the day. And at dinner, I have just a slice of cold mutton.
We will send you a hindquarter of our Hartfield pork, Miss Bates.
Miss Woodhouse! You are too kind, too bountiful. A full hindquarter will last for weeks, I am sure. Oh my! We will fry it a steak so and salt the leg. Eaten moderately with a boiled turnip, it makes an excellent meal.
And I'm afraid we must be running along.
Oh, but you must wait for Jane.
Is she here?
Oh my! I was so overjoyed with your visit that I almost forgot to tell you. Jane has come and will stay for several months. Isn't that delightful? She has just taken a short walk, though why she needed to leave the house, I cannot say. I urged her to stay inside. You see, she caught a cold on the 7th of November and has not been herself. Or maybe it was the 6th of November. Or perhaps it was the 8th. Jane's Campbell and his wife were invited by their son-in-law, Mr. Dixon, to visit his family's estate in Ballycraig. A beautiful place, I fancy. Jane had heard a great deal of its beauty. I suspect it was from Mr. Dixon, though perhaps it was from someone else. Oh, Jane was born in Highbury. Oh, and here she is now. I am so glad that you'll be able to see her, though she will be staying with us for some time. Oh, Jane, just imagine how fortunate we are to be visited by Miss Woodhouse and her friend.
Miss Woodhouse.
Miss Fairfax.
And this is Miss Smith. Pleased to meet you.
The pleasure is mine.
Well, I think just another piece of sweet cake is in order, don't you? Jane, dear, take a seat. Oh, Jane, just imagine. Miss Woodhouse is sending us an entire hindquarter of pork. Isn't that so terribly generous of her?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
We will fry it into steaks. Oh, and salt the leg, but not over-salt it, mind you. It may last your entire visit.
It is our pleasure.
I'm sure we'll enjoy it.
How is it, Miss Fairfax, that you were able to stay with us for such an extended period?
Oh, well, Jane, you see, is just recovering from the cold that I told you about, which she surely picked up in Weymouth. The result of a boating mishap. Mr. Campbell's daughter, you know, has recently married a handsome young man, Mr. Dixon, and the two of them asked Jane to join them in Ireland. They have an estate in Ballycraig, a beautiful place. I fancy.
How remarkable, then, that in spite of her friend's urging and her desire to see Ireland, Miss Fairfax prefers devoting her time to you.
Oh, yes, and entirely of her own choice. And the Colonel and Mrs. Campbell agree with her wish to take in the air of Highbury.
I think they judge wisely. Have you visited Weymouth, Miss Fairfax?
Oh, yes, Jane has been there often. She met Mr. Frank Churchill there.
I should very much like to know your opinion of him. Is he handsome?
He was considered to be a fine young man.
Was he charming?
It was generally thought so.
Did he seem to be a sensible young man?
Well, at a watering place like Weymouth, it was difficult to judge. Manners are all that one can observe, and I believe everyone found his manners appealing.
Well, I'm sure you're right. I'm afraid Miss Smith and I must be running along.
Oh, well, what a shame to be leaving in the middle of such an interesting conversation.
My father will be expecting me.
Oh, of course, dear. We look forward so much to receiving the pork.
Do enjoy it. Good day, Miss Bates. Miss Fairfax.
A whole hind quarter. You are so charitable, Miss Woodhouse.
I'm sorry for Miss Bates. She is so poor, though she is never at a loss for words. What did you think of Miss Fairfax?
She is very beautiful.
And well educated. The Campbells saw to that. But could you trust someone as reserved as she?
I don't know.
It's very hard getting at her real opinion of anything. Makes me very suspicious. Jane Fairfax will require further study.
Please let Miss Woodhouse know I've arrived. Oh dear. Mr. Woodhouse? Someone call an apothecary. Oh no. What shall I do? Oh, good morning, sir. Did I wake you?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Just resting the eyes.
Yes, yes, resting your eyes.
Yes, yes.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Ooh.
Did you hear the news?
News?
The vicar is to be married.
The vicar, Mr. Elton.
Yes, to a Miss Augusta Hawkins.
But he's only a boy.
I believe he is 26.
Well, that's much too young to settle. I don't see why he had to be in such a hurry.
It is quite strange. He's only been away for a fortnight.
Fortnight?
Oh, hello. Jane, dear, come along. Good morning, Mr. Woodhouse.
Bates.
Oh, dear Mr. Woodhouse, Jane and I are ever so grateful for the full hind quarters. Such beautiful pork, sir. You are too bountiful.
Oh, my dear Miss Bates, good morning. Miss Fairfax. Yes, well, we do consider that our Hartfield pork is, well, it's so superior to other porks.
Oh, you are too good to us, sir. Too bountiful. If ever there were people who had as little wealth as we, into everything we could wish for, it is us. Oh, dear Mr. Knightley, it is good to see you too, sir. But I'm so grateful I've almost forgotten. Have you heard the news?
News? What's the news?
Oh, Mr. Elton is to be married.
I cannot imagine what could have possessed him.
I had just finished telling Mr. Woodhouse of the news.
Oh, but where did you hear it from? It's been only half an hour since I received a note from Mr. Cole, who heard of the letter from Mr. Elton the moment Mr. Cole told Mrs. Cole about it. She sat down and wrote a note to me. I put my bonnet on and made sure that we had a salting pan large enough for the pork, then asked Jane if she would like to walk with me to Hartfield. Isn't that right, Jane? Why?
I had business with Mr. Cole this morning and received the letter directly.
Oh, well, that is quite... I believe there has never been such interesting news in Highbury. Oh, dear Mr. Woodhouse, you really are too bountiful. My mother, poor soul, sends her thanks and greetings and says you are most bountiful.
You are most welcome, my dear Miss Bates. And
Oh, Miss Woodhouse, have you heard the news?
News?
Mr.
Mr.
Elton...
Elton is to be married, my dear. A dreadful idea, don't you think?
He will have everyone's wishes for his happiness.
Oh, well, it is great news indeed. Just think, Miss Woodhouse, a new neighbor for all of us. Oh, Jane has never seen Mr. Elton. No wonder she is so curious about him.
Oh.
Is he a tall man?
Well,
My father would say yes. Mr. Knightley, no. And Miss Bates and I that he is just the right height. When you've been in Highbury longer, Miss Fairfax, you will come to understand that Mr. Elton is the standard of perfection.
Oh, very true, Miss Woodhouse.
I hope you mean to take an interest in this news, Miss Fairfax. After all, you have been recently acquainted with matrimonial plans.
Oh, yes, Miss Campbell, the daughter of Jane's guardian,
When
has
I
recent-
have seen Mr. Elton, I shall be interested if that is what is expected of me. We shall not excuse your being indifferent about Mr. Elton.
Well, I dare say Miss Hawkins must be an excellent young woman. Mr. Elton is such a superior gentleman. His extreme attention to my mother, who, as you know, is quite hard of hearing, has been most welcome. Oh. Well, my dear Jane, I believe we must be running along. The weather does not look good, and mother will be uneasy. Oh, thank you again, Mr. Woodhouse. You really are too bountiful. Jane, we should leave immediately. I will not let you out in the rain. Jane is much the better for the weather in Highbury. Thank you very much.
Elsie, there's an extra umbrella. Tell Robert to fashion it for her.
Miss Bates is capable of carrying on a conversation for us all.
Oh, yes. Well, Miss Bates would never harm a soul, my dear. But she does create quite a stir.
Miss Fairfax is terribly reserved.
I told you she was. She speaks when she has something to say or when someone pressures her.
I was merely trying to engage her in conversation.
If she keeps her own counsel, there must be good reason for it. Perhaps it is diffidence.
You may see diffidence, but I do not.
I'm sure your charm will win over her shyness. Good day to you both.
dear, well, I simply cannot understand why a young man should want to get into matrimony so quickly.
Papa,
And to marry a stranger?
Papa, have you ever found Mr. Knightley annoying?
Slightly annoying? Never. Have you?
No, never. Emma, Mrs. Weston.
Have you heard the news?
Yes, we've heard the news. Much too much of the news.
But you cannot have heard about Frank.
He will be in Highbury tomorrow. I received his letter this morning. I knew he would come.
How wonderful.
Yes, well, will he actually come this time?
You have my word.
Well, I suppose that will mean parties and balls and everyone catching cold once again.
He will be with us by 4 o'clock.
Oh, 4 o'clock. You can depend on his arriving by 3. Oh, Emma, you have only my description of Frank, so I urge you not to expect perfection.
Think of me, Emma. At 4 o'clock tomorrow.
I shall. But I have no doubt he will regard you as happily as he does his father.
Oh! Mr. Martin.
Ah, good day, Miss Smith. Or rather, not so good day.
No. It is most certainly raining.
Yes, indeed.
I noticed your sister in Ford's.
She noticed you as well.
Yes, I thought she might have.
Are you on your way to Hartfield?
Hartfield? No. Yes.
I would advise going around to Mr. Cole's stables. The nearest way is underwater.
Oh, it's kind of you to tell me.
My pleasure.
Well then, I suppose I should be making my way.
Miss Smith!
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Oh, Miss Woodhouse, I don't know what I should do.
Harriet, what is it?
I saw him. We stood together.
Holmes, come sit down.
No, I can't. Oh, Mr. Martin, it was horrible. I was on my way to Miss Goddard's when it started to rain. So I took shelter at Ford's, and who should I run into but Mr. Martin? It was dreadful. I hardly knew where I was. I thought I would die standing next to him. But I was also glad that he spoke so kindly. Oh, Miss Woodhouse, do say something and help my nerves.
It's over now, my dear friend. Come, sit down.
I was horrified.
It will not happen that way again. It was just the shock of the first meeting after your letter, and not worth dwelling on.
But I felt so miserable.
It may be distressing for the moment, but you seem to have handled yourself very well.
You think so?
Yes, as did he.
He looked well, but not as beautiful as Mr. Elton. Have you heard the news?
Yes, I think it can only aid in your future relations with Mr. Elton.
I will have been forgotten by then.
Dear Harriet, it shall be for the best.
Emma! sent word that Frank Churchill has arrived and that they are on their way over at this moment.
But he was to arrive tomorrow.
Well, like all young men, he seems to be in a terrible hurry.
I'm not ready.
Why?
I must change my dress.
But it is only the afternoon, Emma, and it is only Frank Churchill. Dear me, she seems to be in a terrible hurry as well.
Ah, Mr. Woodhouse, twice in one day.
And it is only 3 o'clock. Good day again to you both.
Allow me the honor of introducing my son, Mr. Frank Churchill.
Ah, yes. Welcome to Hartfield. It's very good of you to come.
The pleasure is entirely mine, sir. And may I say that your house is as beautiful as any country estate I have seen.
Thank you, sir. It suits us. Now, what do you think of our town?
I already feel it would be my true home.
Excellent, excellent. You must no longer be a stranger then.
Oh, no. The dear boy has Mrs. Churchill to think of as well as ourselves.
Yes, so I've heard. But you must realize, my young man, that your family here now consists of 2 rather than 1. And which is just as much reason for you to spend twice as much time here as anywhere else.
Nothing would make me happier.
Yes, too much of this gallivanting can cause anxiety in some and illness in others.
Where is Emma?
She is readying herself, I suppose.
I'm right here.
Oh, Emma, allow me to introduce...
Miss Woodhouse. Not enough was said in your praise.
You, sir, are too polite.
I want to know everything about you and your beautiful town.
And I want to know what occupies your time in Enscombe and Weymouth. But as the guest, you may begin.
Do you ride, Miss Woodhouse?
A little.
Delightful. And what of your other interests? Is your set musical?
Definitely. Though my skills are far from polished.
I'm sure you underestimate them. What about dancing?
We do like to dance.
Splendid. Is there anything more enjoyable than a ball?
I don't think so. Though, one must have the right partner.
I should think that would not be a problem in Highbury.
And now shall I examine you?
It would be my pleasure to withstand your scrutiny.
What do you think of your father's marriage?
It was the wisest measure. Anyone who is a friend can only rejoice in it.
And Mrs. Weston?
I was prepared for elegant and agreeable manners, but I must confess I had not expected more than a tolerably looking woman of a certain age. I had no idea I was to find such a pretty young woman as Mrs. Weston.
For my sake, you cannot see too much perfection in Mrs. Weston. Though I must advise you not to use a pretty young woman in her presence.
I hope I would know better.
I suspect you would.
In addressing Mrs. Weston, I should understand who I was praising without danger of being thought extravagant.
Fine manners indeed. And even more handsome than Mr. Weston's appraisal. I wanted to know more about Frank Churchill. I was about to pay Miss Bates and Miss Fairfax a visit when I discovered Frank emerging from a visit of his own. I determined to postpone my visit in order to accompany him on a tour of Highbury.
I couldn't help but notice the ballroom attached to the Royal Oak. Is it often used?
There aren't sufficient numbers in Highbury to fill it.
With all the large houses in town, that's impossible to believe. Why, there should be dances here every fortnight through the winter.
And how was your visit at the Bates? Was Miss Fairfax ill?
She certainly looked that way, yet her complexion is so pale as to give the appearance of ill health even when she is well.
I cannot agree, Mr. Churchill. Her complexion was never brilliant, but there is a softness to her skin that gives her face a peculiar elegance.
I've heard that said, but nothing can make amends for the fine glow of health, as your face attests, Miss Woodhouse.
Well, there's no arguing about taste. At least you admire her, except for her complexion.
I cannot separate her from her complexion. You knew her as a child?
Yes, but we were never intimate. I was wicked because I didn't want to associate with one who's so idolized by others. But really, I don't think I could attach myself to someone so reserved.
There is safety in reserve, but there is no attraction.
I have no other reason to think ill of Miss Fairfax, except that such extreme caution is apt to suggest there's something to conceal.
I could not agree more.
I'm glad.
What a wonderful dinner. And Randall's is such a beautiful home, Mrs. Weston. It is a wondrous occasion indeed. And Jane and I are ever so grateful that your son has humbled us with his presence.
We are delighted that you can share in his visit.
Is Mr. Frank Churchill not a terribly handsome and pleasant young man?
Oh, yes, very. Though he reminds me a bit of Mr. Elton.
I can listen to parish business no longer.
What is your opinion of Miss Smith?
I'm not in the least surprised she's your friend. She has a lovely face, and her modesty is enchanting. You have undoubtedly worked wonders on her.
Oh, Miss Woodhouse. Mrs. Weston, Mr. Churchill, I have astonishing news to report. Can you guess it? Jane has been bestowed upon with a gift. A piano forte.
Oh, how fortunate! Who gave it to her?
Oh, we don't know. Can you imagine that? Jane was quite astonished and bewildered to think who might have ordered it for her, but I told her it must have been her guardian, Colonel Campbell, and that put her at ease immediately.
Why do you smile?
Nay, why do you?
I smile for pleasure at Colonel Campbell's being so rich and so liberal.
Very.
I wonder that it was never made before.
Perhaps because Miss Fairfax has never stayed here so long.
You may say what you choose, but your countenance testifies your thoughts on this subject are very much like mine.
You give me more credit for acuteness than I deserve. I smile because you smile, and shall probably suspect whatever I find you suspect.
What do you say to Mr. Dixon, her stepsister's husband?
He did save Jane in that boating accident.
I do not mean to reflect upon the good intentions of Mr. Dixon or Miss Fairfax, but I cannot help in suspecting that after saving her from near death, he had the misfortune to fall in love with her. How else to explain why she came to Highbury instead of going with the Campbells to Ireland?
I had not thought of Mr. Dixon, but upon my word, your reasoning carries my judgment entirely. Is it not always so that a woman should possess the answers to such riddles?
Oh, right this way, Mr. Woodhouse.
What is the matter?
I'm sorry to be so rude, but Miss Fairfax has done her hair in such an odd way.
It is very different.
I've never seen anything so outre. Those curls. I wonder if it is an Irish fashion. Shall I ask her?
No.
I think I will.
Mr. Churchill!
My dear Emma, I've been longing to talk to you. I've made a remarkable discovery.
About Jane's piano?
Oh, yes, and other things. Do you know how she and Miss Bates came to Randall's tonight?
I assume they walked. How else should they come?
Well, Mr. Knightley's carriage brought them, and will take them home.
Why is that a surprise? He knows of Jane's poor health, and no one is more benevolent than he.
I believe there is another reason. She has always been a favorite of his. Can you guess it?
You don't mean...
Mr. Knightley and Jane Fairfax. I'm nearly sure of it. You see the consequence of keeping you company.
Mrs. Weston? He would never do such a thing. Mr. Knightley cannot possibly marry you, but disinherit his nephew. I'm sure it isn't at all likely. I'm amazed you should think of it.
I'm not speaking of the prudence of the match, just its probability.
He would never do such a mad thing. He is happy by himself, with his farm and his sheep, and his library, and the parish to manage. My dear Mrs. Weston, do not take to matchmaking. You do it very poorly. How could he bear to have Miss Bates haunting Donwell Abbey, thanking him all day for marrying poor Jane? So very kind and obliging, so bountiful.
You shouldn't mock her, Emma. The question is not whether it would be a good connection, but whether he wishes it. Couldn't the pianoforte have been the gift of Mr. Knightley?
You take up an idea, Mrs. Weston, and run with it, just as you reproach me for doing.
There is no reason for us to argue. I'm happy to wait for it. But I am more interested in your opinion of Frank Churchill.
Like everyone else, I think he's very amiable indeed.
He's told his father he thinks you're beautiful and charming.
I'm glad to hear it.
He'd much rather reside here than with his aunt, and I think you are the reason for his preference.
May I have a word with Miss Woodhouse?
Certainly.
Did Mrs. Weston say something to disturb you?
Not at all. It was simply our usual fencing.
Though it is a week away, I am already beginning to regret my departure.
Could you imagine residing in Highbury if your aunt were to need you no longer?
No other place interests me more. But now I should like to ask you a favor.
I'll try to oblige.
I should like to hear you play the piano. And I have been given to understand that your playing is as sweet as your manner.
My playing cannot approach that of Miss Fairfax.
She can follow you. I know her playing. But I should like to hear yours. Ladies and gentlemen, at my entreaty, Miss Woodhouse has consented to grace us with her musical talents.
Oh, excellent. Emma never plays as much as she should.
Tis the last rose of summer left to bloom alone. All her lovely companions are faded and gone. No flower of her kindred, no rosebud is nigh to reflect her blushes or give sigh for sigh. I hope my singing did not spoil your playing.
It was a welcome addition.
Oh, what a delightful voice.
I told you he had a perfect knowledge of music.
Not at all, Father. But there is someone whose musical ability is far superior to mine. Miss Fairfax.
I dare not attempt to approach the playing of Miss Woodhouse and Mr. Churchill, but I will if you insist.
She plays well, does she not?
Far better than I. It was kind of you to loan Miss Bates and Miss Fairfax the use of your carriage.
They were very grateful.
The pianoforte at the Bates cottage was very kindly given.
Yes, with her skill, Miss Fairfax deserves a place to play and practice in Highbury, but they would have done it better to inform her of it beforehand. Surprises are foolish things. They add little to the pleasure, and the inconvenience is often considerable. I should have expected better judgment from Colonel Campbell.
You were undoubtedly correct, Mr. Knightley. She did play beautifully.
Incredible.
Again.
Oh!
And again.
Bring tears to my eyes! One more. You can manage this one without effort. That is enough. You will tire her. We've imposed enough upon Miss Fairfax for one evening.
Oh, Mr. Knightley, surely.
At least the pianoforte was not the gift of Mr. Knightley after all. Yet the idea of Jane Fairfax as the mistress of Donwell Abbey, though I could give it no credibility, would not leave my mind. That is, until Frank Churchill took my hand. love with me. There's no doubt of his affection, but is it enough for me to marry? He's charming. I enjoy his company. We agree on nearly everything. And he's mad about dancing.
We must finish what we started, but with more dancers and musicians. How many couples?
5.
Only 5. We must have more.
Is there enough room?
14, 15, 16. No, not enough. We must use the 2 rooms and dance across the passage.
Oh, no, sir. Now that would be extremely imprudent. Emma might catch cold from the draft. Well, so would you all. Mrs. Weston, you would be laid up for weeks.
Then we will only use this room.
Where will we place the supper? We will need a much larger room.
You are unreasonable. Nothing can be further from pleasure than dancing in a crowd.
Exquisite, Miss Woodhouse. You have the art of giving a picture in but a few words, but still, we must have room for the buffet.
What about the Royal Oak?
Now, certainly not, dear. But the rooms at the Oak are always so drafty, please.
But, sir...
Checkmate! Checkmate!
The rooms at the Oak are much larger, and so there will be no need of opening windows.
I would never open a window anywhere.
Well, perhaps just sandwiches rather than supper.
Ooh, capital!
Miss Woodhouse, may I have the honor of the first 2 dances?
You may.
He's asked her for the first 2, my dear.
Has he?
I knew he would.
But being Frank Churchill, he was called away by his aunt yet again.
Of all horrid things, leave-taking is the worst.
You will come again.
I will try with all my power.
Our poor ball must be given up.
We will have it when I return. Do not forget the first 2 dances.
Did we not surpass your expectations?
Yes, my regard for Hartfield is most warm. If you write to me, my spirit shall remain at dear Highbury.
Everything points to his being in love. If he comes again, I must be on my guard not to encourage him. Yet I feel weary, listless, and disinclined to apply myself to anything. I must be a little in love with him. Frank Churchill was hardly out the door before Mr. Elton and his bride was in everyone's mouth.
Mr. Elton and his bride have arrived. What shall I do?
They're not worth your thinking about.
I'm sure you are right. But what will I say when I see him?
Your preoccupation with him is a grave reproach to me, Harriet. I know it was all my doing. I deceived myself and you, and it shall be a painful mistake for the rest of my life. I'm asking you to save yourself from further pain, though you need not care about mine.
Oh, Miss Woodhouse, how shameful of me to be ungrateful. You, who have been the very best friend in my life.
Much better, dear Harriet. Believe me, my affection for you is boundless.
Will you be receiving Mr. Elton and his bride?
I would be held derelict in my duties if I did not.
May I be excused from the occasion?
Of course. As your great friend, I will do everything in my power to spare you from the pain of encountering the Eltons. I wish I could have done the same for myself. Mrs. Elton was vain, extremely satisfied with herself, and possessing manners that could only have been learned at a very bad school.
Your house is so cozy, Miss Woodhouse, so extremely like Maple Grove, is it not, Mr. E?
Very much so, dearest Augusta.
We're glad it reminds you of home.
Smaller, to be sure, but ever so cozy.
When you have seen more of Surrey, I'm sure you will have overrated Hartfield.
Yes, Surrey is the garden of England, you know.
I believe many counties are called the Garden of England.
No, I fancy not. I never heard any county but Surrey called so. Do you have parties at Hartfield? We are ever so busy at Maple Grove.
From time to time.
There's nothing like staying at home for comfort, yet I am no advocate of isolation. I mean, I perfectly understand your situation, Miss Woodhouse. Your father's state of health must be a great drawback. Why doesn't he visit Bath? I assure you, it will do him a great deal of good.
He tried it more than once without receiving any benefit.
In my bath life, I have seen so many instances of its benefits. The advantages of bath for someone like yourself, who's led such a secluded life, would be numerous. I could introduce you to the best of society. Would you not agree, my cara sposa?
Completely, dearest Augusta.
I do not believe Bath would suit me any more than it did my father. Have you met the Westons?
Oh, yes. She was your governess, was she not? I was surprised to find her so ladylike. And who do you think came in while we were there? Knightley himself. Despite his clothes, he is quite the gentleman.
Insufferable woman! Knightley? She had never seen him before. And to discover he is a gentleman. Mr. E. could not have married anyone more gauche. Harriet was fortunate he chose the £10,000 a year.
Jane Fairfax is an interesting creature. So mild and ladylike, and so talented. I quite rave about Jane Fairfax. Miss Woodhouse, we must exert ourselves to do something for her. I mean, such talents must not remain in obscurity.
I'm not sure what more can be done.
My dear Miss Woodhouse, a great deal can be done by those who dare to act. I shall have her very often at my house, introduce her wherever I can, host musical parties to draw out her talents, and be constantly on the watch for an appropriate situation.
Not even Jane Fairfax deserves this. To relieve myself of the Eltons, Mrs. Weston and I planned a ball at the Royal Oak, hoping once again that Frank Churchill's aunt would release him to Highbury.
Is there any chance Frank's aunt will prevent him from coming?
Oh, no, I don't believe so. But her health, you know.
He was to arrive by midday, was he not?
Yes, but his schedule is not his own.
Emma will be terribly disappointed if he does not attend. She's done so much to plan the event.
As have you, my dear. You are to be congratulated as well.
Good evening, Mrs. Elton.
Good evening, Mr. Weston. Now, sir, where is the son of yours? I must take his measure this evening.
We believe he's on his way.
I should hope so. How good of you to attend our ball. Of course, I would attend a ball in my honor. By the way, Mr. Elton is a very enthusiastic dancer. Aren't you, dearest?
Very enthusiastic, my dear.
I shall be happy to lead off.
Oh, as the new bride, it would only be fitting.
Has he arrived?
Well, as of this moment,
Mrs. Weston, my dear Miss Woodhouse.
Frank, allow me to introduce Mrs. Elton.
It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Please excuse my tardiness.
I'm sure Mr. He has told you that I never compliment, but your son's manners are precisely what I like and approve. Though he would be advised to address the issue of punctuality.
Thank you, Mrs. Elton.
How do you like Mrs. Elton?
Not at all. Mrs. Weston, you have outdone yourself. What a brilliant setting.
Oh, thank you. But don't forget, Emma was my ally.
Miss Woodhouse, shall we leave?
Oh, Emma, I'm afraid Mrs. Elton, as the recent bride, will expect to begin the ball.
But my promise to Miss Woodhouse.
What will she do for a proper partner? She will expect Frank ought to ask her.
I am already engaged to Miss Woodhouse for the first 2 dances.
Then you must do the honor, Mr. Weston.
I?
You and Frank must dance second, dearest Emma.
How disappointing.
I thought the ball was to be my own. It's almost enough to make me think of marrying. Mr. Churchill and I will be happy to follow.
You are more than gracious.
Oh, how excellently contrived it all is! Upon my word, I could not have imagined the oak so transformed. A fairyland it is. Oh, dear Miss Woodhouse, how do you do? Your gown is quite becoming. Oh, so sorry to have missed the inaugural dance. My shoes, you know, not quite thick enough. Oh, how do you like Jane's hair? She did it all herself. Jane, are your feet wet? Jane? Jane, you must wear your tippet. My dear Jane, indeed you must. The draft, my dear. It is an inn, after all. And what is this I hear? Going to the post office in the rain. You sad girl, how could you do such a thing?
I assure you I did not catch cold.
We will not allow her to go again, will we, Miss Bates? I mean, Mr. E can fetch letters as well as anyone.
You are extremely kind, but I cannot give up my morning walk. I'm advised to be out of doors as much as I can.
It sounds as if Miss Fairfax was expecting an important letter.
No matter. The thing is determined. Now, what do you think of my gown?
Very elegant.
No one thinks less of dress in general than I, but when all eyes are upon me, I cannot wish to be inferior to others. I believe mine are the only pearls in the room.
I simply cannot understand how Jane Fairfax can tolerate Mrs. Elton.
Jane Fairfax is a riddle to me. She could easily have gone to Ireland. Why would she stay in Highbury only to be plagued by Mrs. Elton?
I wonder if Miss Fairfax has a strong feeling on anything.
Just because she does not make a display of it does not mean she is incapable of creating an accurate opinion of Mrs. Elton.
I beg your pardon. I must give my compliments to Miss Bates and Miss Fairfax.
Frank Churchill seems to not brook differing opinions.
Perhaps he believes you do not hold a high opinion of him. You do of Miss Fairfax, do you not?
Yes, it is true.
You may not be aware yourself how highly it is.
So you are set upon that I shall marry Jane Fairfax. Will you never stop making matches?
It was not I. One says things without an idea of a serious meaning. I haven't the smallest wish for your marrying Jane Fairfax or Jane anybody.
Miss Fairfax is a charming young woman, but she lacks the open demeanor a man would wish for in a wife.
We are grateful to you for clarifying your feelings. Aren't we, Mrs. Weston?
You're welcome.
And will you dance this evening?
I could not possibly keep up with those more expert than I.
What do you say now to his marrying Jane Fairfax?
I say he is so possessed with not being in love that I shouldn't wonder if it didn't end in matrimony.
You were determined to beat me at my game.
And now, Miss Woodhouse, may I have the honor?
most readily, Mrs. Weston, if you will dance with me.
Me? Oh no. I will find you a much better partner. And there is a young lady whom I would be happy to see dancing.
Yes?
Miss Smith?
Ah, Miss Smith! I hadn't noticed. You are very kind, and if I weren't an old married man, I'd be happy to oblige. But you must excuse me, Mrs. Weston. Oh, my dancing days are over.
Miss Smith.
Made Harriet a very happy girl.
Mr. Elton's conduct was inexcusable.
I admit I was completely mistaken about Mr. Elton. There's a littleness about him which you discovered and I did not.
At least we can agree that you would have chosen better for him than he did himself.
Oh, yes.
Miss Smith has some first-rate qualities that Mrs. Elton will never possess.
I'm grateful for your kindness to her. You are certainly not a vain man, Mr. Knightley.
Come, Miss Woodhouse, Miss Fairfax. Come, ladies. What are you doing? Emma, you must set your companions an example. Everyone is lazy. Everyone is asleep. Dance, dance.
I'm ready whenever I'm wanted.
And with whom shall you dance?
With you, if you ask me.
Indeed I shall.
You have shown you can dance, and we are not so much brother and sister as to make it all improper.
You're safe now. No harm done. Shall we stop here?
No,
You need rest and refreshment. I'm sure Miss Woodhouse will oblige with gold.
It was our first spring outing, and Miss Biggerton and I decided to take the Richmond Road. We saw them coming. There were almost a dozen children with a stout woman and a very large boy. And so we ran. But I fell when I tried to follow Miss Bickerton up the bank.
You
and
did everything you could to avoid them.
They wouldn't stop following me. So I gave the boys a shilling, but I had no more in my purse. I tried to run away, but they surrounded me.
I wonder why they were traveling up the Richmond Road.
My calf was cramped from all the dancing last night.
It was very fortunate that I came upon them when I did,
Oh,
and that I was delayed from leaving Highbury.
By the time we met in the garden, Harriet had recovered. Such an adventure could hardly fail to suggest, to a mind like mine, a certain idea. During the ball, I noticed a distinct restlessness on the part of Frank Churchill, and I never felt more than just a little in love with him anyway. But there was someone else who might be a perfect match. I have a scheme in mind that can hardly be contrived more perfectly. It will be a triumph, with little labor required. Mrs. Weston is with child, but Mr. Weston is fully mobile. I shall convince him to help me arrange an outing. Our excursion to Box Hill was rewarded with a fine summer day. Everyone arrived in good time, even Frank Churchill. 7 miles were traveled in expectation of enjoyment, and there was a burst of admiration for the setting at first sight.
That's quite lovely. How excellent. I hope your wife is in good health, Mr. Weston. When is the little one expected?
Well, not for a few weeks, Mr. Perry estimates, and then my outings will be limited.
Box Hill is even lovelier than I imagined.
Yes, how remarkable that most of the party has never seen it. Thank you, Mr. Weston, for introducing us to such a lovely place and so close to Highbury.
It was Emma who suggested...
Though we really should have come on donkeys. Mr. E, we must purchase a donkey. With long walks, there is dust in the summer and dirt in the winter. I mean, the next time I should like to arrive on a donkey, with my Carasposa marching along.
By all means, Mrs. Elton.
I am obliged to you for insisting I come today. I had quite determined to go away again.
But you begged to be commanded.
I am always at your command, Miss Woodhouse. I have no will of my own when you are near.
Your gallantry is really unanswerable.
I say nothing of which I am ashamed.
Dearest Jane, 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 Jane. I really must have your answer to what we spoke of earlier. A lady of paramount character and class, her family line, her rank, her social circle, simply non-pareil. You cannot be wished to be better settled as a governess.
Thank you, Mrs. Elton, for your assistance, but I am unable at present to engage in any pursuit.
My dear Jane, this situation will not last forever. I simply must have your approval to write an acquiescence by the morrow's post.
Mrs. Elton, I beg to be excused from your ministration.
Nonsense! We will speak of this later, but I simply cannot allow you to turn down such a brilliant opportunity.
Our companions are extremely boring. What shall we do to rouse them? Any nonsense will serve.
Oh, don't.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am ordered by Miss Woodhouse, who presides wherever she is, to say that she desires to know exactly what you are all thinking.
Is Miss Woodhouse sure she would like to know what we are all thinking?
Oh, no. Upon no account in the world. Let me hear anything than what you are thinking.
It is the sort of thing that I should never preside about, whether I was presiding or not.
Very true, my love, exactly so. But some ladies say anything, so better to pass it off as a joke.
It will not do. They are most affronted. I will attack them with another gambit. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Woodhouse waives her right to know exactly what you may be thinking and requires only something entertaining from each of you. Either one thing very clever, prose or verse, original or repeated, or two things moderately clever, or three things very dull.
I see. Capital.
Ah, very well then, I need not be uneasy. 3 dull things indeed. That will just do for me, you know. I shall be sure to say 3 dull things as soon as I open my mouth, shan't I?
Oh, but there may be the difficulty. You will be limited to only 3.
Oh, Miss Woodhouse.
Oh, well, to be sure, yes, I see what she means. Please excuse me. I will try to hold my tongue. I must make myself very disagreeable for her to say such things to an old friend.
I like your plan. How would a conundrum do?
Low, very low.
No, sir. Let me hear it.
Well, I doubt that it's being very clever, but here it is. What 2 letters in the alphabet are there that express perfection?
Perfection.
What 2 letters? Really?
M-A. Emma! Don't you understand?
Very clever.
Well done, Father.
I must be excused. I have a great deal of vivacity, but I cannot offer witty things at someone else's expense. Pass us if you please. Pass Mr. E., Jane, Knightley, and myself.
Yes, I pass. I have nothing to say that would entertain Miss Woodhouse or any young lady. An old married man, quite good for nothing. Augusta, shall we walk?
With all my heart. Come, Jane, take my other arm.
No, thank you, Mrs. Elton. I'm not equal to walk at present.
I really must have your answer by today, Jane.
A happy couple. How well they suit one another. Isn't it a wonder that they married upon only meeting in a public place? They knew each other just a few weeks in Bath. How many men have committed themselves on short acquaintance and rooted all the rest of their lives?
Such things do occur.
You were speaking?
I was only going to note that though a hasty and imprudent attachment may arise, there is generally time to recover from it afterwards.
Well, I suppose it's all guess and luck anyway. I have so little faith in my own judgment that when I do marry, I hope someone will choose for me. Will you find somebody for me, adopt and educate her?
And make her like myself.
By all means, if you can.
Very well, I shall undertake the commission. You shall have a charming wife.
Shall we walk, Miss Bates?
Oh, yes, dear, with all my heart.
Shall we join them?
No, thank you.
Shall I call for the carriages, Father?
Let us consult the others. Come, Miss Smith.
Emma, it pains me to see you acting wrongly, and I cannot let it pass without comment.
What do you mean?
How could you be so unfeeling towards Mrs. Bates?
Was I really so very cruel? I doubt she even understood me.
I assure you she did. She felt the full meaning of your words. I wish you could have heard her speak of it just now, with such sadness and humility in her voice. Despite the insult, she was actually grateful you paid her any attention at all.
She is kindly, for sure, but you must admit more than a little ridiculous.
That may be. And if her situation were equal to yours, I would leave her silliness to itself and not quarrel with any liberties you take in mocking it. But she is poor. She has lost most of the comfort she was born with, and if she lives to be very old, she will probably lose more. Her situation should bring out your compassion. She took an interest in you as an infant, and has had the honor of seeing you grown into a young woman, and yet now she is laughed at, mocked in front of her niece, no less, and others who will be guided by your judgment of her? It pains me to say this, Emma, but as your friend, I must speak the truth. It was badly done. Badly done indeed. I must go to London straight away, but I hope you will consider what I've said.
Was I really so very cruel? Others have always admired my cleverness. Even Mr. Knightley, on occasion. A true friend would not be so frank. And it was only Miss Bates, after all. Oh, God. How wrong and foolish I am. How could I have been so contemptuous? Why have I sacrificed the good opinion of such a great friend? I was happy to give over the sweet hours of the evening to a game of backgammon with father. But attending to him did not dispel the vexation Mr. Knightley's words had caused. When the morrow came, I was determined to call on Miss Bates and begin an equal, kindly intercourse. She was humble and civil as before, but with less of her cheerful manner.
Oh, excuse me, Miss Woodhouse. I am sorry to keep you waiting. I'm afraid Jane is not well, but I do not know. They tell me she is well.
Miss Bates, I wish to...
Oh, how kind you are, Miss Woodhouse. I suppose you have heard and come to give us joy.
I have not heard.
Oh, this does not seem like joy in me, but I am so worried about Jane. She has been overcome of late. She is terribly pale. She has no appetite. Her head has ached for days. Mr. Perry says there is no pulmonary complaint, but he believes she has a nervous fever, and confinement to a single room is not good for her.
Miss Bates, I didn't realize her health was so poor.
Oh, she spent the entire morning writing a long letter to Colonel Campbell. There were tears in her eyes perpetually, and I said to her, "My dear, you will blind yourself." Oh, how it pains me to see her so. Oh, I must sit.
I'm truly sorry to hear of her condition.
You are kind, Miss Woodhouse. Do not think us ungrateful. When one is in great pain, it is so difficult to feel any blessing. It will be very trying for us to part with her after having had her for so long.
And where, may I ask, is Miss Fairfax going?
To a Mrs. Smallridge, who have the charge of 3 little girls.
To be a governess?
Oh, yes. Mrs. Smallridge is a charming woman. Jane will be only 4 miles from Maple Grove.
Was it Mrs. Elton who...
Oh, yes. Good Mrs. Elton, our most indefatigable true friend. When Jane first heard of it, she was quite opposed and told Mrs. Elton so over and over, but good Mrs. Elton would not let Jane say no. I didn't think Jane would ever accept the offer, but yesterday evening she took Mrs. Elton aside and told her she agreed. I did not know a word of it till it was all settled.
I'm truly sorry to hear that she will be leaving us. I hope her engagement with Mrs. Smallridge will have every alleviation that is possible. I mean as to the character and manners of the family.
Thank you, my dear Miss Woodhouse. Jane will have a style of living almost equal to Maple Grove, and her salary, I really cannot venture to name it.
Oh, madam, If other children are at all like what I must have been, 5 times the amount of salary will be dearly earned.
Oh, you are so noble in your ideas.
And when, may I ask, is Miss Fairfax to leave you?
Oh, very soon. Very soon indeed. That's the worst of it.
I'm truly sorry to hear that she will be leaving us. Her friends must all be sorry to lose her.
Oh, I see you are looking at the pianoforte. What is to become of it? Very true. Poor Jane was talking of it just now. You and I must part, she said. You will have business here no longer.
Poor Mrs. Churchill.
Yes, who would have thought?
A sad day indeed. Poor Mrs. Churchill.
Why, poor Mrs. Churchill, Papa? She has kept Frank to herself far too long.
Have you not heard?
I believe I'm the last to hear anything.
She is deceased.
Deceased. I don't know whether to be surprised or not.
Well,
I wonder what Frank Churchill will do now that he's free to attach himself to anyone.
let us go to Mrs. Weston, please. Mr. Woodhouse, if you would excuse us. Emma, if we walk quickly, we shall reach the house in no time.
Why are we going to Randall's?
Oh, Mrs. Weston wants to see you.
Has something happened? Is she unwell?
Oh, no, not at all. Only a little agitated. She would have ordered the carriage to come to you, but she must see you alone.
But what can be the matter? Is she really not ill?
Oh, depend upon me. Only ask no more questions. You will know in time.
Mr. Weston, do let me know what has happened.
Oh, she will break the news to you better than I can.
Break it to me. Good God, Mr. Weston, I charge you to tell me this moment.
Here we are, thank goodness. My duty is dispatched. I have been as good as my word. She has not the least idea.
What is it, my dear friend? It will do you good to speak of your distress, whatever it may be.
Can you indeed not know? Can you not guess what you were about to hear?
It must be about Frank Churchill.
Yes. Just 3 days ago, Mrs. Churchill passed away. And this morning, Frank arrived on a most surprising errand. He came to speak with his father regarding an attachment.
An attachment?
An engagement! A positive engagement! But Frank Churchill and Miss Fairfax are engaged. Nay, they have been long engaged.
Miss Fairfax? Good God, you cannot mean it.
I can hardly believe it myself.
This is a circumstance that will take me half a day to comprehend. Engaged before either of them came to Highbury?
Since October. It has hurt both me and his father equally. Oh, some part of his conduct we cannot excuse. Oh, my poor Emma.
Please, allow me to relieve you of any concern about the effect on me. There was a period in our acquaintance when I did like Frank and was very much disposed to be attached to him. Or nearly attached to him. However, that feeling ceased, and for the last 3 months I've cared nothing about him in that way. It is the simple truth, Mrs. Weston.
Mr. Weston will be almost as relieved as I. It was our dearest wish that you might be attached to each other, and we were persuaded it was so. Imagine what we've been feeling on your account.
I've gratefully escaped. But that does not acquit him. What right did he have to try to make me fall in love with him? And how could Jane bear such behavior?
Well, there have been misunderstandings between them, recently arising from the impropriety of his conduct.
Impropriety? It is too common censure. So entirely lacking in what a man should be. So lacking in the integrity and truth a man should display in every transaction.
Nay, now I must take his part. Though he has been wrong in this instance, I have known him long enough to applaud his good qualities.
But Jane was on point of going as governess.
He knew nothing about that, Emma. It was his discovery of what she was doing that made him come straight to his father and put an end to this concealment. He has promised to write and explain all. Don't let us be in such a hurry to condemn him.
For your sake, I shall not. I suppose in time we will all wish them well.
thank goodness.
Oh, it is all favorably resolved.
A very pretty trick you've been playing on me, sporting with my curiosity to exercise my talent for guessing. You frightened me. I thought you'd lost at least half your property.
Oh.
And here, instead of it being a matter of condolence, it turns out to be one of congratulation. I congratulate you, Mr. Weston, with all my heart, on the prospect of having one of the most lovely and accomplished young women in England for your daughter.
Well, it was not my intention, believe me. And now, there is a visitor for you, Emma, in quite a state.
For me? Whom?
Harriet Smith.
Oh, no. Harriet! To be duped a second time by my misconceptions and flattery. And now I have the same office to perform with her that Mrs. Weston has just done for me. I should never have encouraged her feelings for Frank. I ought to have prevented them. Common sense would have been to tell her there were 500 chances to 1 against his ever caring for her. But common sense and I have had little to do with each other. Mr. Knightley was right. I've been no friend to Harriet Smith.
Oh, Miss Woodhouse, your father told me I would find you here. Is this not the oddest news you've ever heard?
What news do you mean?
About Jane Fairfax and Mr. Frank Churchill. Oh, you needn't be afraid of owning it to me. Mr. Weston has just told me. He said that it was a great secret, but that you would know shortly. Had you any idea? But of course you did. You who can see into everyone's heart.
Me? I doubt I have any such talent at all. Had I suspected them, I should have cautioned you immediately.
Me? Why should you caution me? You do not think I care for Mr. Churchill. Thank you, dear.
Shall I serve the tea cakes, Miss?
No tea cakes, thank you.
I'm glad to hear you speak so bravely, but remember there was a time when you cared for Frank Churchill.
Mr. Churchill? Never. My dear Miss Woodhouse, how could you so mistake me?
Harriet, what do you mean? Good Lord, am I supposed to then...
That you've been so mistaken amazes me. Mr. Churchill, indeed. I'd hope I had better taste than to think of him. I know we haven't named the man who is the object of my affections, but I've only had the courage to love him because you seem to approve and even support my attachment. I wouldn't have presumed had you not always been acquainted.
Harriet, stop. Let us understand each other now without the possibility of further mistake. Could you be speaking of Mr. Knightley?
Of course. I could never have a thought about anyone else. And so I thought you knew. When we talked about him, it was clear as possible.
But it was Frank Churchill who you praised in saving you from the thieves.
I was thinking of a much more precious circumstance. When Mr. Elton would not dance with me, and Mr. Knightley, gentleman that he is, came to my assistance. It was his noble benevolence and generosity that made me feel how superior he was to every other creature on earth.
Good God, this is a most unfortunate, a horrible mistake.
I know there's a great difference between us, but you yourself said that matches of greater disparity have taken place before.
But Mr. Knightley must marry no one but me. Oh God, what have I said? Oh no, what have I done? Until this moment, I never knew my own heart. Have you any evidence of him returning your affections?
Oh, yes. He's often talked quite delightfully. And last week he praised me for my feelings. He called them honest and generous.
Oh, goodness. I do remember him mentioning the same to me. Well, I will only venture to declare that Mr. Knightley is the last man in the world who would give a woman an idea of his feelings more for her than he truly does.
Thank you, Miss Woodhouse.
Oh, God, that I had never seen her. The vanity of pretending to know everyone's secrets. The arrogance of proposing to arrange everyone's destiny. How could I not know how much my own happiness depended on being first with Mr. Knightley? No, it isn't likely. Is it? Who but I would have taught Harriet to elevate herself to Mr. Knightley's love?
Emma, is there something wrong? This damp weather is probably to blame.
I am fine, Papa. Just one more term. I suppose we will see much less of the Westons when their child is born.
Well, yes, we shall have to take ourselves to Randall's once in a while to see them.
Papa, if Mr. Knightley ever were to marry,
Mr. Knightley marry? Not on any account, my dear.
but if ever he should, we would miss his
do
visits
not
terribly,
worry.
would we not?
Do not worry about that day, my dear. Let us go into the house, shall we?
I think I shall remain in the garden a bit longer.
But it is so damp. You have forgotten your bonnet.
I will be fine, Papa. Do go in, and I shall follow you directly.
How do you do, Emma?
Oh, just how do you do, Mr. Knightley? You have returned.
Are you well, Emma?
Yes, I'm always well. And yourself today?
Well, I suppose.
Good. Excellent. I trust your journey was pleasant?
Oh, yes, I suppose it was.
There's news that will surprise you.
Of what nature?
Of a wedding.
If you mean of Miss Fairfax and Frank Churchill, I have heard it already.
How is that possible?
I had a few lines of parish business with Mr. Weston this morning, and he gave me a brief account of what had happened.
I suppose you were probably the least surprised of any of us. I have not forgotten that you once tried to give me caution. I wish I had attended to it, but I seemed doomed to blindness.
Time will heal the wound, Emma. Caring for your father will help. Frank Churchill will soon be gone.
You are kind, but you are mistaken. I am in no need of consolation. My blindness to what was going on led me to act in a way that I must always be ashamed of. But I have no other reason to regret that I was not in on the secret earlier.
Emma, is that true? No, I understand you, and no need to explain more. Frank Churchill is no object of regret. I'm grateful you can even say as much. We are lucky your feelings were not further entangled, though I must admit I could never be sure to the extent of them.
Mr. Knightley, I must correct you. I'm ashamed in confessing I was never attached to this man. I was tempted by him because my vanity was flattered. But I never regarded them as anything but a habit or a trick. And now I see it was a blind to conceal his situation with another. It was his object to deceive us all, and no one was deluded more easily than I.
I never liked Frank Churchill much, but it seems I may have underestimated him. I'm sorry for Jane Fairfax. She deserves a better fate.
I believe they will be happy together. I believe Jane and Frank to be very sincerely and mutually attached.
It is good of you to say so. He's a very lucky man indeed. At 23 to have drawn such a prize. He neglects, even humiliates a woman who loves him, and still everything turns out fine. His aunt is in the way. His aunt dies. He is the favorite of fortune indeed.
You speak as if you envy him.
I do envy him, in one respect. You will not ask me the point of my envy, I see. You are determined to be wise. Are you not in the least bit curious? I cannot be wise, Emma. I must say what you will not ask, though I may wish it unsaid the very next moment. Emma,
Oh, then don't speak it! That is, if you cannot. Take a little time. Consider. Do not commit yourself.
Thank you. You're going in, I suppose.
I stopped you ungraciously just now, and I'm afraid gave you pain. But if you have any wish to speak to me openly friend, I will hear whatever you wish and tell you exactly what I think.
As a friend, that is a word I wish you would not say. No, why should I hesitate? I've gone too far already for concealment. I accept your offer. Tell me, Emma, have I ever any chance?
Any chance?
My dearest Emma, for dearest you ever shall be, my beloved. Say no if it is to be said. You're silent, absolutely silent. I cannot make speeches. If I loved you less, I could talk about it more, but you know me. I must only speak the truth. I have lectured you and blamed you, and you have borne it as no woman in England would have borne it. Bear with the truth now, Emma, though the manner may have little to recommend it. God knows I have not had the courage to be a lover, but see now that my feelings for you. Have you nothing to say? Are you Emma Woodhouse completely without words? Shouldn't we be attending to your father?
My father? Oh my goodness, I nearly forgot about him. What shall we say to him? He will be heartbroken. It may very well kill him.
Let us think for a while on how we can cause him the least pain, but for now we should go into him.
I must compose myself. You go first. Go.
Good evening, sir.
He loves me.
Was that Emma? I'm not sure, sir. From the sound of it, it very well could have been a group of small children.
I'm worried about Emma walking in this dampness.
It is cleared up considerably, sir.
Dear Emma, are you not chilled?
Oh, no, Father.
How odd. The dampness seems to have revived your spirits. Well, I had forgotten to ask of you a visit with Miss Bates. Is she well?
As well as can be expected, Father.
Ah, well, the dampness does affect us all, but I am sure that your appearance brightens her spirits, as it does all of ours.
She's the most perfect child.
I do look forward to spoiling her.
She looks hungry. Don't you think she's hungry?
Well, you have read Frank's letter.
Yes. I know he was in the wrong, but I can feel how he suffered. And he is so much in love with Jane and so grateful to you that I cannot possibly think ill of him. Even Mr. Knightley, who greatly disapproved of Frank's behavior, is ready to believe that his character will benefit from Jane's tutelage.
And what is your opinion of Jane?
I'm very sorry to hear that she'll be leaving Highbury. I should very much like to be her friend.
Oh, and so you shall.
You are most kind to see me, Miss Woodhouse. Most kind.
My heartiest congratulations.
Well, has she not made a remarkable recovery from her illness?
Yes, she is looking well indeed. I could tell that you and Mr. Weston dote on her.
I long to make apologies, Miss Woodhouse.
You are too scrupulous. You owe no apologies. Everyone is perfectly delighted.
You are very kind, but I was so cold and artificial towards you. I had to act a part, a deceitful one.
Pray no more. All the apologies should be on my side. Let us forgive each other at once.
There is yet another visitor.
I have to thank you, Miss Woodhouse, for the kind and forgiving message Mrs. Weston conveyed. I hope you do not retract what you then said.
Not in the least. I'm particularly glad to shake hands with you and give you joy in person.
I thank you with all my heart. I am ashamed of having kept that secret for so long. I should have told you everything.
It's not worth the regret.
Thank you. Look at her. Did you ever see such delicacy? It is a most uncommon complexion.
I've always admired her complexion. It was you who found fault with it.
What an impudent dog I was.
There is one mystery to be solved. Was it you who gave Jane the pianoforte?
It was. At the time, it was the only way I could express my feelings.
She shall make good use of it.
Well, I should like to pay my heartiest congratulations to the betrothed. Congratulations to you both.
Thank you, sir.
As do I. Yes, now let us repair to the dining room, shall we? There's an excellent buffet, including calf's foot jelly. Shall we? Emma, I have something to tell you.
Good or bad?
I'm not sure. It's on a situation we do not think alike.
Pray, tell me quickly.
Have you not heard from Harriet Smith this morning?
How should I ever hear before someone else does?
She is to marry Robert Martin.
No, it's impossible.
It's true. I have it from Robert Martin himself. You like their engagement as little as I thought you did. I wish we thought the same way about this.
You can't mean it. You don't mean to say that he has proposed to her again, and that Harriet has accepted. You can only mean Mr. Martin intends it.
I mean that he has done it. Dearest Emma, please consider how this pleases your young friend. His good sense and good manners, they would impress you.
I think Harriet has done extremely well.
You do?
Oh, yes. Her connections may prove worse than his.
I was utterly convinced you thought otherwise.
I was utterly unprepared for the news. But are you certain you heard correctly?
Do you suppose I am such a blockhead that I do not understand a pronouncement of marriage? What sort of man do you deserve?
I always deserve the best because I never put up with anything less.
You're materially changed since we last spoke of the subject.
I would hope so, for at that time I was a fool. Having created so steady and persevering an affection in a man, Harriet is the luckiest girl in the world, with one exception.
My lectures have not been in the best way. I've done you no good, I'm sure.
I'm very sure you did me every good.
You are.
I was a terribly spoiled and precocious child.
Yes, how often you would come to me with one of those devilish looks on your face, saying, Mr. Knightley, I am to do such and such because Papa says I may. Always something I did not approve of.
How impossibly spoiled I was. No wonder you remember those speeches.
Mr. Knightley, you would always call me. You've used it so much it seems almost informal, yet it is formal. Too formal.
I remember in one of my fits of precociousness calling you George. I did it because I thought it would provoke you. But as it didn't, I never did it again.
And can you not now call me George?
Impossible. I cannot call you anything but Mr. Knightley. Though I promised once to call you by your Christian name.
When?
I won't say when, but I will say where. In the place where E takes G, for better or for worse. I'm losing courage. I know he'll feel neglected, and I can't bear to see him suffer.
Once we are married, dear Emma, his suffering will be over.
While he lives, can we not simply consider ourselves engaged?
Oh, do you not wish to be married?
Of course, as soon as possible.
Then we should do everything we can to accommodate him.
Emma, is that you?
Yes, Papa. Mr. Knightley and I, we have something to tell you.
What is the time?
Nearly 5, sir.
Oh, can it wait till after supper?
Well,
I'm afraid not, sir.
Oh, what a pity. I was dreaming of calf's foot jelly. Shall we ring for some?
Father,
Mr. Knightley and I, we are to be married. Are you all right, Papa?
Married? To each other?
Yes.
But, dear Emma, you promised me you would never marry.
I was a child when I said
But
so.
it is so much better not to marry. It is a frightful state, I assure you.
Mr. Knightley and I have set our minds to it.
Well, don't you remember what happened to poor Miss Taylor? And what about your poor sister, Isabella?
They visit here often.
Oh, not often enough. Not nearly enough, no. Oh.
We will be much closer than Isabella or Mrs. Weston.
Not close. How will I bear it?
There will be no change in your comfort, Papa.
No change? No, I'm afraid that's not possible. No, Emma, no. The alteration would be much too difficult.
Mr. Woodhouse, if I may intrude, what if Emma and I were to live as close to you as we do now?
But, my dear man, Donwell Abbey is all the way up on the next hill.
Yes. What I'm asking, sir, is would you allow me, Emma and I, to live at Hartfield with you?
Do you mean it?
Of course.
What do you think of it, Papa?
So many proposals in one day.
We see Mr. Knightley every day as it is. And who do you always want to write your letters and consult on business? Whom is always so cheerful and attentive and attached to you, Papa?
I cannot deny it, but it is all too much for an old man.
We would simply go on as we have.
Oh, cannot be done, Emma. I'm afraid not.
What do we do?
Mr. Woodhouse, have you not heard of the robbery at Mrs. Weston's poultry house?
A robbery? At Randall's?
Oh, yes, sir.
Oh, but that is but half-mile away or less. Then pilfering poultry, why that's a form of housebreaking. Oh my goodness, what on earth shall we do?
I believe I can be of assistance.
Would you not feel so much more at ease with Mr. Knightley under our roof?
Well, tell me, sir, can you suggest a plan to prevent such criminal activity?
Oh, why, of course, sir. I do.
I do.
You are so fortunate, Miss Woodhouse.
And so are you.
I know that now.
My warmest congratulations to you both. I look forward to getting to know you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Woodhouse, and congratulations to you and Mr. Knightley.
Dearest Papa, you will not be too sad today, will you?
Well, I shall look on the bright side, my dear. Marriage will put an end to your matchmaking career.
Poor Mr. Knightley. How could he be so taken in? Sad business for him. Shocking plan living together. It will never do.
It was a wedding very much like other weddings, where the parties had no taste for finery or parade.
Very little white satin, very few lace veils. A most pitiful business.
But in spite of these deficiencies, the true friends who witnessed the ceremony were fully rewarded by the perfect happiness of the union.